Before we talk about the types of heat transfer, we need to first remind ourselves of the definition of heat. Heat is the energy of the movement of the particles in a material. Heat is the energy of the movement of the particles in a material. So you may think, well, what is that talking about, the movement of the particles? Think back to when we looked at solids, liquids, and gases and how they were particle-wise. A solid has particles that are so tightly packed together they can only vibrate. A liquid has particles that are a little bit more spread out. They can flow past one another, which is what allows us to be able to pour a liquid. And a gas, oh, the particles are really spread out. They just keep moving until they hit something and bounce off, and hit something else and bounce off. That's how particles of a gas move. So heat is talking about the energy of the movement of these particles. Now, let's talk about insulators and conductors for just a moment. This is an insulated cup. The green is the insulation. Now, an insulator will not let heat pass through either way. An insulator will not let heat pass through into the cup. An insulator will not allow heat to pass through out of the cup. That's why a cold drink will stay cold or a hot drink will stay hot. Insulators do not allow heat to pass through. A conductor, on the other hand, will allow heat to pass through. Either way. So in this cup, which is not insulated, it's a metal cup, it's a conductor. Heat can travel into the cup and heat can leave the cup. A conductor will allow heat to pass through either way. An object is either an insulator or a conductor. It cannot be both. So it's either or, either an insulator or a conductor. Okay, there are three types of heat transfer. First one is conduction, and that's when heat moves between two objects that are touching. Now I've drawn a picture here of a pot on a hot stove. That pot got hot because of conduction. The pot is sitting on the hot stove, they are touching, and the heat is going from the hot stove to the pot. That's conduction. They have to be touching. Second type of heat transfer is radiation. That's when heat is moving between two objects that are not touching. For example, the sun radiates heat to the person. So there's a heat transfer, but these things are not touching. It's the same as if you hold your hands over a campfire or near a campfire. You're getting the heat, but you're not touching. The last type of heat transfer is convection. And convection is a heat transfer within a material. It's within a material, not between two. It's within a material, either a gas or a liquid, where the heated material is moving around and spreading out. So, convection is, there's a heat transfer within the material. The material is either a gas or a liquid, and the heated material is going to move around and spread out. An example here, I've got a pot on a hot stove and there's boiling water in the pot. We know that the water on the bottom of the pot is the hottest. And we know that hot water is lighter than cold water. So it's hottest down here, it's going to rise. And the cold water that's on top, furthest away from the heat, it's heavy, so it's going to sink. And then it'll come down here and get heated and get hot and rise. And then it's going to cool and sink. So that is convection. It's a heat transfer within the material. Technical difficulties, actually physical difficulties. Now, you have this graphic organizer in your materials. An easy way to figure out which type of heat transfer it is to ask yourself the question, how is it moving? Is the heat moving from one object or material to another? If your answer is yes, ask yourself, are the objects or materials touching? If they're touching, yes, it's conduction. If the objects or materials are not touching, it's radiation. So conduction and radiation both are heat transfers between two objects. The difference is that in conduction, the materials are touching, and in radiation, they are not. Now our question is heat moving from one object to another? If the answer is no, then it is convection. Because remember, convection is when the heat is transferred within the material. It's not going from one to another. It's transferring within the material.